Australia has lost one of its greatest motorsport icons. Allan Moffat, the fierce competitor who became the face of Ford and a dominant force across decades of touring car racing, has died at the age of 86 after a long battle with Alzheimer's disease. His passing marks the end of an extraordinary chapter in Australian sport, a chapter filled with roaring engines, fierce rivalries, unforgettable victories, and a legacy that will stand as long as racing exists in this country. His family confirmed the news through an emotional statement on his official Facebook page. They shared that Moffat passed away peacefully at 11:05 a.m., surrounded by the people he loved. The family described him as not only a champion on the racetrack, but also a mentor, advocate, and deeply valued friend to many. They asked for privacy as they navigated the grief of losing a beloved father and grandfather. Although born in Canada in 1939, Allan Moffat became one of the most recognizable and influential figures in Australian motorsport. His journey from a young immigrant to a household name is one of determination, discipline, and pure racing passion. The story of Allan Moffat is also the story of how Australian touring car racing grew into a national obsession. When young Allan Moffat moved to Australia with his family in the late 1950s, no one could have predicted the impact he would have on Australian sport. He was methodical, serious, and intensely committed, traits that later defined his style both on and off the track. While most young drivers of the era relied on instinct and raw talent, Moffat took a more scientific and disciplined approach. He analyzed, prepared, strategized, and trained with a level of professionalism rarely seen at that time. He was not a showman, he was a perfectionist, and that mindset shaped him into one of the most effective racing drivers of his generation. Moffat made his Bathurst debut in 1969 as part of the factory Ford team. This was the same year Peter Brock also entered the scene, a coincidence that would ignite one of the most legendary rivalries in Australian sport. Ford versus Holden, Moffat versus Brock, two drivers who elevated one another, sometimes clashing, sometimes collaborating, but always pushing the sport to new heights. Moffat's arrival injected fresh intensity into the Bathurst 500. His precision, confidence, and no-nonsense attitude made him an instant standout. For fans, he quickly became the warrior wearing the blue oval badge, a hero for Ford supporters nationwide. The 1970s belonged to Allan Moffat. In 1970 and 1971, he claimed back-to-back Bathurst victories in the legendary Falcon GTHO, a car that is still celebrated by collectors and historians today. Moffat's driving in those years wasn't just fast, it was commanding. He controlled races with an intensity that almost made victory feel inevitable. In 1973, he took another Bathurst title, further strengthening his place among the greats. But it was the 1977 Bathurst 1000 that truly cemented his legacy. That year, Moffat's Ford Falcons delivered one of the most iconic finishes in Australian motorsport history. A 1-2 team formation finish across the line. Moffat, nursing an injured foot and pushing through pain that would cripple most drivers, guided his car to victory while teammate Colin Bond followed behind. The image of the two Falcons crossing nose to tail remains one of the most celebrated moments in racing, a symbol of dominance, teamwork, and strategy. The Moffat-Brock rivalry defined a generation of fans. It was more than Ford versus Holden. It was discipline versus flair, calculation versus instinct, quiet intensity versus charismatic showmanship. Moffat was the cool, focused tactician. Brock was the relaxed crowd favorite. Together, they transformed touring car racing from a niche sport into a national obsession. Their battles became part of Australian culture, remembered long after the engines cooled. And yet, for all their on-track rivalry, the two shared deep, mutual respect. That respect would shine in one of the most surprising twists of motorsport history. In 1986, fans witnessed something they never thought possible. Allan Moffat teamed up with Peter Brock at Bathurst. The idea of the two rivals racing together, in a Holden no less, stunned the entire country. For nearly 2 decades, they had represented opposing sides of a sporting war, but their partnership proved that true champions recognize greatness in one another. Their collaboration became one of the most talked-about moments in Australian racing history and symbolized the maturity and sportsmanship that both drivers carried throughout their careers. Moffat's talents were not limited to Australia. In 1987, he teamed with John Harvey to win the opening round of the World Touring Car Championship at Monza, Italy. His overseas success made him a global figure and introduced new audiences to the high standards of Australian racing. Even more impressive was his adaptability. After Ford withdrew from motorsport in the early 1980s, many wondered if Moffat's career would stall. Instead, he reinvented himself. Joining Mazda, he drove the rotary-powered RX-7 with the same confidence he had shown in V8 Falcons. In 1983, he won his 4th Australian Touring Car Championship, a testament to his versatility and determination. Later, he returned to Ford machinery to win the Fuji 500 in 1989, the final major victory of his driving career. Moffat retired from full-time driving in 1989 at the age of 50, but he never stepped away from the sport he loved. He continued fielding teams at Bathurst until 1996, giving younger drivers the chance to learn from one of the best. His sharp mind and deep understanding of racing made him a natural television commentator for Network 7 during the early days of the V8 era. He became a familiar voice to millions, explaining technical details and strategies with calm authority. Away from the TV cameras, he also worked as an ambassador for brands including Ford, maintaining a connection with fans and the automotive community. In 2019, Moffat publicly revealed his dementia diagnosis. Instead of stepping back, he became a patron of Dementia Australia, lending his voice and reputation to raise awareness and support families dealing with the disease. Moffat faced Alzheimer's with the same courage, resilience, and dignity he showed throughout his racing career. His openness helped break down stigma and reminded Australians that even heroes face human challenges. The Allan Moffat Foundation continues this important work, ensuring that his legacy extends far beyond motorsport. Moffat leaves behind 2 sons, James and Andrew. James followed in his father's footsteps, becoming a professional racing driver and proudly carrying the Moffat name into a new era of Australian motorsport. Allan was deeply proud of his sons, and his influence can still be seen in James's racing style, disciplined, focused, and fiercely competitive. Throughout his life, Allan Moffat earned significant honors, including becoming an Officer of the Order of the British Empire, OBE, and being inducted into both the Supercars Hall of Fame and the Australian Sports Hall of Fame. But the greatest honor was the love of the fans who watched him dominate Bathurst, fans who debated Moffat versus Brock for decades, and fans who recognized him as a pioneer who elevated motorsport to new heights. Moffat was more than a racing driver. He was a visionary, a trailblazer, a competitor who demanded excellence, a man who inspired generations. He changed how teams prepared, how drivers trained, and how fans saw the sport. He shaped the culture of Australian motorsport and gave it an identity that still lives today. His engine may be silent now, but the echoes of his victories will continue to roar. Allan Moffat leaves behind a legacy that cannot be replaced. His victories, his rivalry with Brock, his dedication, and his lifelong passion for motorsport created a story that will be told for generations. He showed the world that greatness comes from discipline, courage, and an unshakable belief in your craft. Bathurst remembers him. Ford fans remember him. Australia remembers him. Allan Moffat, a true motorsport legend, forever etched into history.